Okay, so voting, Chapter 10. Some early restrictions when voting started here in the U.S. Only white adult males who owned property could vote. So the people who could not vote were women, African American males, Native American males, and even white males if they did not own property. Then it became people under 21 with the 26th Amendment, so it changed from 21 to 18. So it used to be you had to be 21 to vote, then it became 18. Who can vote today? Basically anybody who's over 18 years old. Now, some exceptions to that. A lot of times if you are currently under conviction of like a felony or some other serious crime and you're in prison, a lot of times they won't let you vote. But other than that, that's pretty much it. You can't be discriminated as far as voting based on race, color, gender, or age. Okay, qualifications. You have to be registered to vote, at least 18 years old. You have to be a resident here in the U.S. for at least 30 days and a citizen of the U.S. Here, there's history for voting for African Americans. If you remember us talking about discrimination and segregation, a lot of these things came up either in our political cartoons or just in talk, such as poll taxes, literacy test, and the grandfather clause. Remember, poll taxes was a charge you had if you were going to go in and vote. A literacy test was before you could vote, you had to pass a literacy test that was insanely hard. And then the grandfather clause, if either one of your grandfathers was African American, then you would not be allowed to vote. In the 2000 presidential elections, voters in Florida were confused by the butterfly ballot. You had to poke holes for who you voted for. Okay. Now, since they had to punch holes, then they were read by a scanner, and the scanners were misreading them, so they had to go back and count them by hand. This is probably the most famous voting, well, I guess up until this year. But this is the most famous case where there was a mistake with the reading and it became a really tight race. It was within 500 votes that decided who was going to be president in Florida. So voter registration, most states require registration 25 days before an election. The registration is by mail or in person. The National Voter Registration Act allows people to register when they renew their driver's license. The forms ask for your name, your address, your age, and then also your party preference. So you can register Democratic, Independent, or Republican. Secret ballots, regardless if it's a voting machine, all voters are allowed to cast a secret ballot. You can vote a straight ticket or a split ticket. A straight ticket means you vote strictly for one party. So it's straight down the line, vote one party. A split ticket is you vote for people in different parties. You're voting for who you think is going to do the best job. You can also do a write-in vote, which is where you write in a candidate. These are often not very successful because, when you write somebody in, typically they're going to get fewer votes than somebody who's already printed on the ballot. The steps in voting on election day, you go to the polling place. That's the location where the voting is carried out in your precinct, or if you remember from last chapter, that's our voting district. The polling places are set up in town halls, schools, fire stations, community centers, public buildings. For us here at the lake, it's at the fire station. Challengers at the clerk's table for each party who verify your form and signature to verify your eligibility to vote. Make sure that you are who you say you are and you get your voting form. You then receive your application form. People who will be out of town, sick, military personnel can request an absentee ballot. This is counted on election day with the rest of the ballots. For counting the vote, the polls close, and then that's when the votes are counted. The results of the vote, which are called returns, are given to the election board. The election board then certifies the vote. Okay? Computerized counting takes a few hours, and the winner is announced. State canvassing authority may take several days to certify the election of the winner because a lot of times they'll go back and do either recounts or just to make sure that everything has checked out and there are no problems. The use of an exit poll is where they sample voters who are leaving to ask how they voted. And a lot of times the media will do this to try and predict a winner. Why your vote matters, all the people eligible to vote are called the electorate. Okay? Each person's vote is counted. And this is what we were talking about earlier. In the 2000 presidential election between George Bush and Al Gore, it was decided by 500 votes in the state of Florida. It came down to one state. Whoever won that state was going to win the election. And it came down to within 500 votes. So reasons to vote or reasons not to vote. for voting. A lot of people are proud of their citizenship. If they are more educated, a lot of times they're more likely to vote. Middle-aged citizens usually have the highest turnout. Typically, young people and older people are harder to get out and vote. The higher a person's income, the more likely they are to vote. It's usually a chance to choose government leaders and a chance to voice your opinion on past leaders. So if someone is affiliated with a certain party and you didn't like them in the past, then you can vote for the other party to then take power the next time and see if they can do any better. Reasons for not voting: there's something called apathy, which is just a lack of interest or a lack of caring. Sometimes people don't meet the voting requirements. They're either too young or they may be in prison after committing a felony. They may not be registered. They think that their vote will not make a difference, or so a lot of times there's plenty of registered voters in the U.S. who just don't go out and vote. Again, there's plenty of people who are in their younger years, 18 through 30, or older years, 65 and above, who just don't come out and vote because they either can't or don't want to. Types of elections: we have general elections where there's some initiative, where new laws proposed by citizens and you get to vote on them. One of those that happened recently here in Columbus County was the quarter-cent sales tax, where for every $4 you spent, you would get taxed 1 cent. It ended up getting turned down, and that tax was going to go to education here in Columbus County. There's also a referendum, which is a vote on the initiative. Okay. Special elections: there's runoff elections, which you have to get a majority vote in order to pick who's going to be the winner. A lot of times this is when you have several people running for a position and nobody wins the majority. So you take the top two and put them up and they have a runoff, and then whoever wins the majority between those two wins the election. There's also a recall election, which is a vote to remove public officials from office. This is pretty rare, but it does happen. And then, of course, the one that everybody knows about: every 4 years we have our presidential elections. The electoral votes: electors hold electoral votes in the Electoral College system. It's a winner-take-all system. We've talked about this before. There's 538 votes. There's 535 because there's 435 representatives in the House, 100 in the Senate, and then Washington, D.C. gets 3, which is where you add that 3 and get the 538. Now, somebody needs 270 to win. It could end in a tie, 269, but then the Senate would have to break the tie and pick the new president. Okay. Running for office: a lot of politicians will canvass, which is going through the neighborhood, asking for votes or taking public opinion polls. They will ask people who are popular for endorsements, meaning the popular people will say, "I endorse so-and-so for this reason," or "I endorse them for president or for governor," or whatever it may be. There's also a lot of times propaganda that will go out, which is an attempt to promote a particular person or idea. You see this through commercials and everything else when it comes time for election season. And there's advertising and image molding, and there's campaign expenses. Financing a campaign: we talked about this a little bit. The Federal Election Campaign Act, it's a law requiring disclosure of each candidate's spending. It limits the amount that they can spend, at least that they can spend directly to a candidate. Contributions that are over $200 must be reported. Soft money and PACs, which are political action committees. They're special organizations set up to raise money to support candidates, and this is soft money. It's unlimited amounts of money for general purposes, such as sending out mail, voter registration drives, or on different types of media, such as commercials, radio ads. PACs give the most money, usually to incumbents, who are people who have already won, who are in office and are running for re-election. So some campaign reform: there's the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, or the McCain-Feingold Act, which prohibits national political parties from raising soft money. Corporations, unions, and interest groups are banned from running ads of candidates for federal office within 60 days of general election and 30 days of a primary election. Candidates may collect up to $2,000 per donor, and political parties can collect $25,000 per donor per year. So the Electoral College, we've talked about it a little bit before. 538 total electors is the number in the House, plus the number in the Senate, plus the 3 people from Washington, D.C. That equals 538. For North Carolina, we have 15. There's 13 representatives in the House. There's 2 in the Senate, gives us 15. Whoever wins North Carolina gets all 15 votes. 270 is the magic number needed to win. Okay. Obama had 278 in 2008. Here is a look at the presidential election as far as the public or the popular vote in North Carolina. If you look here, it was less than 14,000 votes that decided who got the 15 electoral votes from North Carolina. And here is Columbus County, fewer than 2,000 votes. And we will pick up influencing government in Chapter 11. So, see you later.